China has begun constructing a massive dam on Brahmaputra River in southeastern Tibet near border with India. The project involves building 5 hydropower stations with a total investment of approximately 1.2 trillion yuan, or about $167 billion.
This is the project of a century.
The most impressive power generation system ever envisioned.
It's the hydropower equivalent of a mission to Mars.
That this will generate about 300 billion kilowatt hours a year.
High above the tree line, where roads cling to cliffs and the air feels thin, a river runs along the roof of Asia. In Tibet, it's called the Yarlung Tsangpo, and at one point, it does something that looks almost impossible on a map. It swings in a tight horseshoe and then drops more than 2,000 meters in about 50 kilometers through a gorge at the Great Bend. That single plunge is why engineers and strategists keep paying attention. Downstream, this same water changes its name and its meaning. In India, it becomes the Brahmaputra. In Bangladesh, it becomes the Jamuna, spreading into a wide, braided river that can be both lifeline and threat. Across the region, tens of millions depend on this basin for water, food, farming, and energy. And when something big happens upstream, it doesn't stay upstream for long. On December 26, 2024, China approved a massive hydropower plan on the lower Yarlung Tsangpo, and on July 19, 2025, construction began on what many reports described as the world's largest hydropower project. The plan has been described as 5 cascading stations, a price tag reported around 1.2 trillion yuan, and an expected generation figure often cited near 300 billion kilowatt hours per year. Those numbers are hard to picture until you remember where the water goes next. That's where the water bomb idea comes from. It suggests a single switch that one nation can turn off the water for 2 others. But rivers don't work like power cords. The real story is more subtle, and that's what makes it more serious: leverage, timing, and uncertainty. The project is commonly linked to the Great Bend area near Madog, also called Moto, in Tibet's Ninchi region, close to the Indian border. Reporting describes it as a cascade, multiple plants stepping down the river, built to capture that extraordinary drop in altitude. Exact engineering details are still limited in public, and that lack of clarity becomes part of the tension. Downstream countries are being asked to trust a blueprint they cannot fully see. What we do know is why this site is so tempting. Hydropower is gravity turned into electricity. Water falls, turbines spin, and energy comes out. The Great Bend offers a rare combination of huge height drop and powerful flow, which is why observers keep calling it a once-in-a-generation energy prize. The comparison everyone makes is to China's Three Gorges Dam, 22.5 gigawatts installed. Put a roughly 60 to 70 gigawatt class project beside that, and you understand why neighbors are watching. Then comes the practical question: where does that electricity go? Tibet's local demand is limited, so reporting has pointed to long-distance transmission. That means moving hydropower to other parts of China through the national grid. It's one reason the project is framed not only as green energy, but as a pillar of national planning. And there is a longer pattern behind it. China has already built multiple hydropower projects on the river system in Tibet. The Great Bend Plan is widely described as the biggest step yet, an escalation in scale, cost, and political meaning. But big dams are never just big batteries. They are also big controls. A dam can store water, release water, and in some designs, divert water through tunnels before returning it to the river. Some coverage of the Great Bend project discusses long tunnels and extremely difficult construction in hard rock. Those details matter because how it's built can decide how it can be used. Here's the first twist. The boldest fear, that China can shut off the Brahmaputra, is often overstated. Multiple assessments suggest the Tibetan headwaters contribute a minority share of Brahmaputra flow, and that share varies by season. Some basin summaries cite estimates around 15 to 25% of dry season flow, when downstream rainfall is lower. So why are India and Bangladesh still anxious? Because leverage doesn't require total control. If you control the headwaters, you control the first gate in the system. Even a smaller share can matter in the dry season, when river levels fall, and every extra cubic meter affects irrigation, transport, and ecosystems, and when surprises are most expensive. This is where the term hydrohegemony enters the story. Researchers use it to describe power at the river basin level, how one actor can shape outcomes through water resource control strategies. The point isn't that water automatically becomes a weapon. The point is that control changes the bargaining table. Now look at the smaller pieces that create big leverage. Start with information. During the monsoon, upstream river data can be a flood warning tool. These are numbers that help people downstream move animals, protect homes, and make life or death choices before a river rises. Data sharing has been a recurring point in regional river discussions, and when trust is low, even missing data can feel like a warning. Now add timing. A hydropower system can hold back water briefly, then release it later to match electricity demand. In normal operation, that can mean lower flow at one moment and higher flow at another. To downstream farmers planning crops or officials planning for floods, a shift in timing can feel like a threat, even if the annual volume stays similar. And then there is the fear of the extreme event. The Himalaya is one of the world's most active mountain belts, and steep valleys do not forgive mistakes. In this terrain, earthquakes and landslides are not rare accidents, they are part of the landscape. So any mega project has to be judged not just by average days, but by worst days. The Great Bend area is not just steep, it's unstable and hard to reach. The Brahmaputra Basin also spans biodiversity hotspots and densely populated regions, raising the stakes for ecological disruption. When you carve roads, tunnels, and dams into such terrain, you don't just move rock, you change habitats, water temperature, and migration paths. Sediment is another quiet character in this story. The Ganges-Brahmaputra system carries an enormous sediment load, which is why these rivers constantly reshape channels and floodplains. When dams trap sediment, the river's behavior downstream can shift in slow, stubborn ways, changing erosion patterns, river depth, and how floodwaters spread. And the climate adds a new layer of pressure. The upper Brahmaputra Basin on the Tibetan Plateau is highly sensitive to climate change. Scientists track how snow, glaciers, vegetation, and shifting precipitation can alter seasonal runoff over time. That means the river system is already changing, even before the first turbine spins at the Great Bend. So let's be precise. Can China turn off the water for India and Bangladesh? In a literal sense, no. Even if an upstream dam holds back flow for a time, water continues arriving from rainfall and tributaries downstream, especially during monsoon months. Some reporting has described the project as run of the river, meaning water should continue along the usual course. But here's the uncomfortable truth. A myth can still create real effects. When people believe a switch exists, governments spend more on counterdams, reservoirs, and emergency plans. Tensions spike. Cooperation gets harder right when cooperation is most needed. In that sense, the water bomb is not only concrete and steel, it's also psychology. There is also a second kind of bomb that doesn't require intent: sudden releases during extreme weather, earthquakes, or operational mistakes. Operators might lower reservoirs quickly for safety, and in a steep basin, sudden changes can travel fast. None of this means catastrophe is inevitable. It means the margin for error is thin. Now, zoom in on why this matters to India and Bangladesh right now. For India, geography makes the worry personal. The dam area is close to Arunachal Pradesh, a region tied to long-running border tensions and competing maps. That proximity turns an engineering project into a strategic one, because now water infrastructure sits near the same lines where political trust is already fragile. For Bangladesh, the worry is downstream. What happens in the Himalaya can show up as changed dry season flows, altered sediment, or different flood timing across the larger delta system. Bangladesh has less room to maneuver because it sits at the receiving end, and even small upstream shifts can amplify on the way to the sea. For China, the project fits multiple goals at once: more renewable electricity, more infrastructure work, and more capacity in a frontier region. Supporters frame it as clean power and national development. Critics focus on ecological risk and geopolitical fallout. Both things can be true at once, and that's the dilemma. Here's the part that decides whether this becomes a stabilizing project or a destabilizing one. The hardest part isn't concrete, it's trust. China says the project will not harm downstream countries and will prioritize ecological conservation. India and others push for transparency and consultation. Those claims are hard to test without shared data, shared studies, and shared warning systems. And trust is hard to build when the first concrete is already being poured. One reason river politics gets stuck is that the proof arrives late. If a dam changes seasonal flow or traps sediment, it can take years to measure downstream impacts cleanly. By the time scientists can say, "This changed," the infrastructure is already built. People downstream are forced to adapt around a new reality. So the real question isn't only, will this dam cut off water? The sharper question is, who gets to decide what normal is for a river shared by millions? In transboundary basins, the strongest power is often the power to act first and define the future while everyone else plays catch-up. The Yarlung Tsangpo megadam is a symbol of the century we're entering. A century where clean energy projects can still create conflict because the resources they depend on cross borders. Rivers don't respect flags. They connect mountains to deltas, and one decision upstream can echo across thousands of kilometers. The best outcome is not drama, it's boring systems. Open data, clear flood warning protocols, joint scientific monitoring, and agreements that survive political mood swings. Because if trust collapses, every monsoon becomes a rumor factory, and every rumor becomes a risk. If you live along the Brahmaputra or the Jamuna, you don't get to opt out. You live inside the timeline of the river. The water will arrive, as it always has. The only question is whether it arrives with cooperation or with fear.